Welcome back to the program. Take a minute to subscribe if you haven't already. Tell your friends and family to do the same. Like the video if you do so. We had a bunch of stuff to get into today. SCOTUS ruling on the 14th Amendment and taking up the Trump immunity case. President Biden's open borders immigration policy rolls on without any efforts by the Republicans to stop it. Check on economic data. Check on financial markets. Presidential race heats up. Super Tuesday tomorrow. Talk about quickly congestion pricing in New York City and the State of the Union on Thursday. All right, so to get started, great news yesterday, of course, for democracy, for the American Constitution, certainly for Republicans and Donald Trump. And that is a 9-0 ruling by the Supreme Court indicating that states do not have the right to take a presidential candidate off the ballot. That is a congressional prerogative based on Article 3 of the 14th Amendment, which relates to insurrection. I remind you, of course, President Trump has not been charged with insurrection, has not been found guilty of insurrection. None of the rioters from January 6, 2021 have been charged with insurrection or found guilty of insurrection. All those in jail are serving time for trespassing or damage to public property, resisting arrests, assaulting police officers, but not insurrection. So good news there for the Supreme Court. 9-0 decision. The liberals and the conservatives came together and agreed that that should not happen. So Colorado, Maine, and Illinois made a huge mistake. And I'd like to point out the mainstream media was wrong on this from the get-go. They told their viewers over and over and over, Trump is going to be kept off the ballot because he violated Article 3 of the 14th Amendment. It's just not true. So they have egg on their face again. And it's just another example of the media being wrong when it comes to Donald Trump and what conservatives do in the country. The other thing the SCOTUS has done is they've agreed to listen to the case put forth by President Trump's legal team, that is whether or not the president has immunity from prosecution as a result of his decisions as president. The Supreme Court has agreed to listen to that case. It does not mean they're going to support Donald Trump. It may, but it does not mean that. And the media is very upset by the Supreme Court even considering taking on this case, listening to this case. No downside to listening to the case. And so Democrats are angry that President Trump won't be more caught up in legal troubles in 2024 than he's likely to be now that these things have been delayed. President Biden's open borders immigration policy continues, approaching 10 million people allowed into the country illegally. We have some serious national security threats developing when it comes to immigration policy. If this was a Republican president doing this and Democrats oppose it, they would be using every legal avenue they had available to them to stop this. Republicans are not doing so. And if Donald Trump were to get into office, watch the legal hassles he's going to have from Democrats. Democrats are going to be filing lawsuits left and right to stop any policy initiatives by the president. Republicans simply don't do this kind of thing. No temerity to do so. Be interesting to watch the juxtaposition of these things as we develop, if that were to happen. Again, I'm calling for Democrats to win in November. If I'm wrong, of course, we'll see. So when it comes to immigration, we also find out that President Biden now has, for the past 3 years, secretly been flying people from their home countries in Central and South America into the United States. Been kept it secret. It's been revealed in the past 24 hours that he's been doing this. Again, unvetted, no background checks, no idea who these people really are. And keep in mind, these Central and South American countries, they're emptying their prisons, their mental hospitals. And some real challenges there. I'm sure he's going to talk about it in the State of the Union. Let's check in on some economic data for the week. No data yesterday, Monday. We had some data today, Tuesday. Today we had January factory orders, minus 3.6%, worse than expected and worse than the prior month. Factory orders are a volatile series, as you can imagine. It's very expensive items, right? Manufacturing equipment, stuff that's produced in factories, typically expensive stuff. We don't consume that stuff on a regular basis. Think of capital goods, for instance. But nonetheless, clear signs the economy is weakening. Remember, we still have an inversion in the U.S. yield curve, indicates recessionary pressure is arriving. If not for the massive levels of state and federal debt over the past 3 years, we would definitely be in recession by now. Also today, we had the ISM Non-Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index from the Institute for Supply Management. 52.6 was the number, came in worse than expected and lower than last month. This is for the month of February again, so lower than January. A number above 50 is expansionary. And again, this is just services, so non-manufacturing, just services. A little bit of strength here. Above, again, below 50 is contractionary, above 50 is expansionary. A decent number, but not too much to crow over. Factory orders and ISM together isn't going to do much to change the outlook for Fed policy in the next few meetings. They'll be on hold here in March, keep the federal funds rate at 5.25% to 5.5%. Likely going to be on hold for June as well. Well, the factory orders gives a little bit of hint the economy's weekend might give the Fed room to ease. But again, I'm calling for the Fed to stay on hold for an extended period of time. There's going to be political pressure for the Fed to ease rates as we go through the year towards the election. The Fed has not reached its target. Inflation still remains elevated, above 3%, and the target is 2%. Don't let the foot off the pedal yet. Let's keep focusing on managing inflation. Remember now, the politicians, Democrats, have not done anything to help on the inflation front. Any efforts that have been used to help inflation, and inflation has fallen, so it's increasing at a decreasing rate now, well below the highs of 8 to 9% we saw last year, but nonetheless still rising. And Democrats are doing nothing to help this. Only Federal Reserve monetary policy and you and I as consumers have led to this drop in the rate of inflation. Because on the fiscal side, on the government side, they keep spending, 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 and spending. Inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon, and this deficit spending at the federal and state level is just doing nothing to help. Now, with that in mind, keep in mind that New York City is about to bring in, for the first time in America, congestion pricing in Manhattan. And what a regressive, horrible tax this is going to be. $15 to drive your car into Manhattan south of 60th Street between the east side and the west side highways. $25 for trucks, $26 for bigger trucks. Very aggressive. It's simply a tax scheme. They're trying to reduce traffic to help global warming and all that crap, stop people driving cars, get them back on transportation. Public transportation in New York City is horrible. And they're raising money for the MTA to make public transportation better. How much you want to bet they blow that money? Looking to raise billions of dollars. They're having public hearings on this, having already built all the gantries and created all the plans. There's a bunch of lawsuits out there that may stop this, but this is horrible. I'll blame on Mike Bloomberg. Mike Bloomberg turned New York City into a billionaire city and priced out millions of Americans. And it's becoming a city of the very poor and the very wealthy, and it's horrible. And this congestion pricing is going to hurt the boroughs, commuters, buses that come in and out of the city. Really, really bad news. Anyway, that's inflationary, more inflation. Let's take a quick look at markets today. The S&P 500 down 52 points at 5,078 on profit taking. Remember, we've been hitting daily records, weekly records here for the past several weeks. This all was kicked off in December by a dovish Fed comment by Fed Chair Powell saying that he's done raising interest rates and might lower interest rates in the future. You got to sell these rallies. Don't be putting new money to work up here. This is a bubble, and the Fed is causing this bubble. Checking elsewhere, the fixed income market, bonds, 10-year Treasury U.S. bond market, the benchmark U.S. bond, 4.14%, down 8 basis points today. Good news that the 10-year is still above 4%. The 30-year at 4.29%, down 7 basis points today. Not good. We have an inverted yield curve from 1 month through the 7-year. And obviously, out to 30 years, people are not concerned about inflation as they are in the next 6 months or so. And that inversion of the yield curve usually indicates recessions coming our way. But again, debt has saved us from that. Deficit spending. Check on oil, WTI, NYMEX, 78.18 a barrel, down 56 cents today. Natural gas, $1.95, up 4 cents today. Gold took out highs today, 2,137, new technical high up here, up $11.60. And Bitcoin tested $67,000 as it come off that high. Bitcoin is bid on the back of uncertainty. And of course, Bitcoin is just a pyramid scheme. Nothing of value is created by Bitcoin. It only gets value from scarcity as derived by the founder of the coin, and just a Ponzi scheme. It's just a pure speculative asset. In the currency markets, dollar a little bit weaker today. The US dollar index 103.77, down 6 points. Dollar yen trading 149.97, down about 50 points today. So a weaker dollar, stronger yen. Euro against the dollar 108.60, unchanged on the day. And sterling against the dollar 127.10, up small, stronger sterling, weaker dollar. So that those correlations are pretty good today. But dollar has become range bound, Dollar strength seems to be the main theme still. And then we look at commodities. Again, we mentioned oil, natural gas, wheat down small, copper down, silver down. The Dow Jones Industrial Commodity Index a little weaker as well. So we're getting some weakening demand globally. When we think of commodity prices, we have to think about the global economy. So the economy puddling along here at 2.5% growth rates. Inflation remains a problem and largely driven by debt, government debt, corporate debt, and household debt. Think credit cards. All right, so today is Monday. Tomorrow is Super Tuesday. And we have 15 states plus America Samoa going to the polls tomorrow. Polling data suggests Donald Trump is likely to have a sweep and win by double digits in most of these states. But there is some uncertainty in the outcome. There is a chance for Nikki Haley to do better. And to do better for Nikki Haley means to maybe win something or to get over 40% of the total vote cast. She did win Washington, D.C. primary on Sunday, but that, of course, was meaningless. A very small group of voters, and Trump didn't even try. Very liberal Republicans, left-leaning Republicans there, so supporting of Nikki Haley. That's her only victory so far, so Trump is 8-1. The challenges for Trump and the opportunities for Nikki Haley are the open primaries. Alabama, Arkansas, Minnesota, Texas, Virginia, and Vermont have open primaries. That means Democrats can vote in Republican primaries. And that's the only way she might get some traction. Certainly in Vermont, there's a chance she could win Vermont because there's so many Democrats in Vermont that hate Donald Trump. To the extent they have a Republican governor, it's a centrist, left-leaning governor. Think rhino, I think, is the best way to phrase that. And so in these open primaries, there's a chance for Democrats to vote for Nikki Haley and therefore against Trump to push Nikki Haley maybe a little further down the road when it comes to the primary races. Although tomorrow, after the votes are cast, it's likely Trump will have the necessary delegates to clearly indicate to Haley she has no chance. Which is to say the remaining states that have delegates available won't be enough if she wins every one of them for her to get ahead of Donald Trump on the delegate count. If she loses tomorrow as expected and Trump basically sweeps or comes close to sweeping every state, American Samoa is another spot she might do well in, and Alaska, kind of tight in Alaska as well. But if he does win as expected, Nikki Haley has to drop out on Wednesday. There's no point in continuing. Then lastly, let's just check in on Thursday. We have the State of the Union coming up for President Biden. He's been out of the public now for 4 or 5 days. All he's doing, certainly today, tomorrow, was rehearsing. My guess is this will be one of the shortest State of the Union addresses. It will be as simple as possible. And not surprisingly, he's going to brag about a whole bunch of things. He's going to brag about creating the most number of jobs ever by a president, which is going to be a lie. That was the reopening of COVID. And he's going to talk about Bidenomics and the great success that President Biden has had as the president, passing some of the greatest bills in all of presidential history. Well, let's go through it together. What are the 4 key bills that President Biden leans on to demonstrate his success as a president? The American Rescue Plan. This is in reaction to COVID-19. It was not necessary. COVID was over. Didn't need any more support for the economy. The economy had plenty of support. This was another direct payment to households, $300 a week federal unemployment benefit for 9.7 million people out of work, put out of work by the lockdown itself, $7.25 billion for small businesses, $128 billion in grants for state educational agencies. None of this spending was necessary. That was pure inflation, and that was pure politics. No Republicans supported this bill, and all these bills that he passed when he had a majority in the House and the Senate. And presidents don't get credit for passing bills through which a majority just rubber stamps it. The other bill that he passed was the infrastructure bill, $1 trillion infrastructure bill that did get some Republican votes. The rhinos in the House and the Senate voted on support of this bill, which gave Biden the license to call it a bipartisan bill. Money for bridges, roadways, public transport, airports, electric vehicles, low emission public transportation, a lot of Green New Deal stuff in this bill. No question we need an infrastructure bill, but it should be done in the regular process of presenting a budget to the Congress each year by September 31st of each year to vote on for the new fiscal year, not in these standalone bills. Another massive increase in government spending and a huge increase in deficits. The CHIPS Act. The CHIPS and Science Act of 2022, $53 billion in federal funding to help reshore semiconductor chip manufacturing in the US. We found out, as I've been telling people for decades and decades, since the 1980s for sure, that our reliance on China has become a national security threat. We found that out during COVID. Many of the things we need in our economy are now supplied by China, and that the lead thing there was semiconductors and chips. President Biden was in the Senate for decades at a time when he was allowing trade policy to be formulated in such a way that allowed U.S. manufacturers to ship what was a manufacturing base here in America over to Asia, primarily China. So this is him correcting his mistakes in the past. Again, another massive deficit spending bill. The Inflation Reduction Act, which was a lie, this is really just the Green New Deal. It's a social spending bill, did nothing to help inflation. Now, the things that they say, President Biden, Karine Jean-Pierre say, that this bill did to help inflation was they reduced the federal deficit, a blatant lie. They have not. Massive deficit spending. Promoting production of certain goods, right? So think industrial policy, think the CHIPS Act, and the limit of the cost of prescription drug for seniors, which is a good idea. But that's it. That's their inflation reduction plan. The rest of the bill was all about green energy and forcing the transition to green energy under the guise of battling global warming. Think electric vehicle forced upon us by the Biden administration. And so those are the primary deals that the president's going to lean on. He'll also lean on his unwavering support for Ukraine, the $100 billion we've spent already on Ukraine, and another $60 billion they want to send over there that's still stuck in Congress, even though Ukraine has no chance of winning the war against Russia. It's been a stalemate for some time. And there's going to be half the negotiated peace where Ukraine gives up southern Ukraine and Russia gets its land bridge from the Russian territory to Crimea and the Black Sea. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video. Always try to buy American.